We are here again, Friday Live. We're finally doing it on a Friday, which is good news. And today we figured we'd talk about macro trends that impact the market. She can enlighten us on the banking aspects of it.
Morning, how are
All right.
you?
Yeah.
Good.
We had a slow start. Sorry about that.
It's quite all right. It's
All right,
Friday morning.
so we want to speak about macro trends and really what influences the real estate market. And obviously, interest rates obviously affect the market, right? Lower interest rates encourages people to buy.
Yep.
Higher interest rates kind of gives a pause sometimes, and people get like a little skittish and may pull back and hold back. Are you saying the same thing?
I mean, we definitely are seeing that, although um, I do think that people have become accustomed, right, to where rates are right now, right? So we're not seeing it as much as like first coming out of the pandemic,
Right.
but but every so often, and I'm going to say like maybe it's like every 4 to 5 weeks ish, we see like a dip in the market, right? And this has been going on probably for a good year now, where like every, let's call it 3 to 6 weeks, because there is no real pattern. um but like something market driven, something either geopolitical or something that's happening in the stock market, or the obviously like the all of this noise around tariffs
Right.
at one point like caused rates to for mortgage rates to drop, then it caused mortgage rates to come up some, and then back down again. So and people, I think, are very in tune to the news, right? They're getting it through their phones, and it's so instantaneous that definitely, when there's a lot of noise about how maybe mortgage rates are on the lower end, my phone is ringing more frequently.
Right.
Um, but but I also think too, like sometimes all of this volatility causes a bit of uneasiness
Right.
for people, right? And they're like, oh, buying a home is like one of the biggest things you might do in your lifetime, and like, should I make such a big decision when there's all this like turmoil going
Well,
on?
Well,
um
well,
I mean, others, and what I try to encourage people is I say, hey, look, buying a home in some place where you can nest and settle and be comfortable and, protect yourself from everything that's going on in the world, could be the antidote for what you need. So
right.
try to turn it around, right?
Right.
try to, yeah. Yeah, but people get concerned about their jobs and,
Yeah.
Right.
job market, drop, basically, employment, rates. If they look, everyone's looking at the forecast, and they're basically saying, "Oh, I'm about to sign a contract.
I want to make sure I have a
I
job.
want to make sure I have a job," and
Yeah.
people pull back over that.
Right.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
job market, right? People become more confident and then they'll buy a house because it's a big commitment, as you said, right?
Yes.
It's always get nervous, especially once you sign that contract, Leslie, you're committed to close on that, right?
Right.
So it becomes really a very big decision when you're buying a home. If you're losing money in the stock market, you kind of pull back. If you're feeling good about the stock market and your earnings are good, then you're more confident about buying, right?
Yes.
I think
Yes.
so not only economics play into this, right, but also what's happening in the world in terms of climate change, in terms of uh, uh, climate disasters in the world. If there's an earthquake, if there's a hurricane, if there are wildfires, right? There was
Yes.
wildfires down in New
New
Jersey,
Jersey.
right? I was shocked about that. I never even think of it.
Yeah, this one guy who started it, so
I was
Yes. Yes.
that I didn't know, but even though it really impacts your life in many ways. Obviously, it impacts the value of real estate or lack thereof in California. If you have a hurricane disaster in the Carolinas or in Florida or Texas, it really impacts the value of real estate, right? So you really have to be aware, A, of where you're buying
Yep.
and what could impact you in terms of the climate, what could impact you or wind disasters or whatever. So
Yeah. And where and what and how, like, risk averse are you? I have like one of my best friends has always had a home by the beach. and it was like a family home that her parents had, bought when she was little, and then she and her brothers maintained it. And after like a couple of hurricanes, and by the way, like, a couple probably over the span of 20 years,
Right.
right?
Right.
um but she just like meant, like, she's like, I can't deal with another hurricane. Like,
Right.
I can't deal with, having to like redo the basement and this and that. Now, her brother, whom she shared the home with, like, he's like, I love having a house at the beach. And that's like one of the things that you occasionally are going to have to deal with. And that's why you have insurance. And, all the times that we spend there that are beautiful and perfect make up for that. So they wound up, selling that home. Her brother bought a new home at the beach, and she bought a home in Fairfield, Connecticut. That's like
Okay.
near a little beach, but like not in a flood zone or anything like that, right?
Well, you also have to be concerned about your insurance rates and then the assessment
Yeah,
of this depending on where you live. But I also think what you mentioned is like people's moods, like the psychology behind this, like how it affects you mentally, right?
right,
Really, your outlook on life. It really makes you have a different outlook on the way you see things in life, depending on what's based on what's happening in the world,
right,
right? It determines how you view real estate as well.
right.
Definitely.
So it's like a whole
Yeah. Yeah.
psychological.
Yes,
It, I think also you have to look at like historically what's happened in 2008. When there was a big recession here and rates really tumbled,
right.
or home
Home
values tumbled.
values tumbled, rates went up, right?
Right, right. It was amazing. Right? The marketing change. So it's like all of these things you have to. Not that this could happen again or may happen again now, but you kind of remember if you've been in the market a long time, or if you've been in the industry a long time, you remember the cycles. I remember when I first started in the industry, it was when all the savings and loans went bankrupt. So I have kind of a history of it, and it affects the way you buy and sell real
Sure.
estate and the way you value it,
Yeah, no,
right? So,
1,000%.
I
so
remember those days. I remember having a closing, and
right,
there was American Home Mortgage. My client had a loan with them, and we scheduled the closing, and the next day I heard they shut down. Not only are you're not closing, they shut down completely, and you have to find some other way to get financing.
Yeah.
right.
I
It's
mean, that
amazing.
that that happened to more than one lender, right? I mean, I hopefully we're in a situation now where, like, and look, we've had a couple of banks that failed more recently, right?
Right,
But now there seem to be measurements in place where another bank is, will acquire them, and you can still kind of have a somewhat seamless, process, to still close. But you know, I think even with all of this though, right, like you said, Michelle, like there's some of it's so much, there's so much psychology, like your own psychology behind it. You still, there's always going to be people that want a new home or need a new home, or finally feel like they're in a position to buy a new home, right? Because there's some folks that are like concerned about employment, and others that are feeling like really great in their jobs, and and they're making great money, and we see it every day,
right,
right? Especially in our area. And I always say to those folks, like, look, you're in a great position, right? Because there aren't, maybe the pool of buyers isn't as wide right
right,
now. And the fact that you're able to, you've got the money to buy something, or you're qualified for financing. Now, the time to buy a home is when I always say it's like when you need it or want it and you can afford it,
correct.
then don't let these other things, because look, there's always going to be like bad stuff happening in the world. It's never going to be like an ideal situation. There's always going to be like, okay, well, maybe insurance now, you know Like there was an issue once with flood insurance. Like nobody could get flood
Right.
insurance, right? Now, like flood insurance has been fixed. It's actually like not even as expensive. Now it's more like wind
Right.
insurance, and solving that
Right.
problem.
Well, the age of the property makes it more difficult to get insurance.
Right, right.
I will say the last thing probably that really impacts, I think, the way people buy and sell is we could look back at the pandemic, which is the most recent catastrophe of what happened and impacted real estate, right? We couldn't show properties. We had to find a way around it. How can we even access the properties or negotiate on the properties? But even the way people moved around, there was a right?
Exodus out of the city.
Exodus out of people didn't want to be in an elevator, didn't want to be in closed spaces, so they were looking for like outdoor spaces, where they could set up a pool, even an above ground pool or anything where they can enjoy themselves to take their mind off of the pandemic and COVID. So I think that the way people lived and the way people migrate and move really is determined a lot. I mean, the pandemic is a clear example of this. And then afterwards, when things settle down, many of these people who bought hastily are now returning to the city and have tried to sell their property.
Yep.
Not always for the same price that they bought it at, right?
Yep.
Because prices were very inflated. So it's kind of interesting to see,
Yes, definitely.
right, how all of these trends impact real estate and buying of real estate.
Yeah.
The more,
And we'll be interested to see what the next trend will be.
hopefully, stay tuned. Hopefully, it's not a pandemic. All right. And we wish everyone a good weekend.
Yes.
Enjoying the weather today so far.
Yeah, so far. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.